Welcome to Locally Sourced. I'm Jenny Hinsman. Today we are going to be talking about land preservation and conservation for our current and future generations. It is my pleasure to introduce Chris Wood. Chris is the former board chair for Oblong Conservancy. And Chris, would you like to talk about Oblong for us?
Well, first, thank you for the opportunity. Excuse me. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about this. Oblong was formed in 1990, some 26 years ago, when a group of local citizens came together and were concerned about development and the lack of open space. So the all-volunteer group got together, and over the course of the last 25 years, we've conserved something in the order of about 1,200 acres. We're an all-volunteer organization.
Great. Well, as a board member for the Putnam County Land Trust, both of our organizations have a lot in common. First of all, we are both nonprofit organizations with an all-volunteer board, and we're both dedicated to preserving the land locally and also conserving the land through stewardship. And I know that we're very focused on making sure that these properties are properly taken care of. And but we also focus on education and recreation for the local community, so that we can educate them about the importance of preserving lands. Can you tell us more about what land trusts do?
Well, essentially, I think you could describe it in two ways. The first is really to conserve land, to conserve open space. And the second is by way of education. There's no way that it's going to be possible to conserve all the land, all the open space, simply because there aren't resources available to do that. So the other part of this, the most important part, is education, because if you can educate people about the need to steward their resources, then essentially you spread the conservation net much wider. So it's a twofold thrust. One is to actually conserve land, and the second is to educate people about stewarding their resources.
Okay, so before I go to my next question, for those who are not clear about what stewardship is, can you just explain that?
Well, basically, it's husbanding natural resources. Mm-hmm. So if, for example, you're a landowner, and let's say you're a householder and you've got a small garden, a small yard, stewarding the resources is being mindful of the habitat that exists. You've got plants and you've got birds that come to the backyard, and the idea is to create conditions which are most ideal for them. So you would plant plants that provide habitat for the insects that they might feed on, and there would be other types of animal that you'd want to attract. So you'd basically, what you're talking about doing is creating a habitat which is conducive to the wildlife, the flora and fauna.
Great. So can you please explain what the difference between fee and conservation easement is for people?
There are two ways to conserve land, essentially. One is for the land trust to take fee ownership of the property, and the second is to take what's called a conservation easement over it. Now, what that involves is the existing landowner retaining fee ownership of their property, but surrendering some or all of the development rights to the land trust that holds the conservation easement. And the terms of that conservation easement are worked out. There's no template for it, but they're worked out with the individual landowner, and they would provide for the existing landowner utilizing the land in an agreed way. But essentially what they would do is surrender, as I say, some or all of the development rights.
So both Putnam County Land Trust and Oblong have been working closely together on a very important project, and I'm hoping you can help to explain it. It's called the Great Swamp Project, and it straddles both, well, we're also calling it Swamp Smart, but it's about the Great Swamp, and it straddles both Dutchess and Putnam counties. And could you please talk about the significance of this collaboration between our two organizations?
Right, well, let me start with saying a little bit about the watershed. It extends to about 60 or 70,000 acres, and not only includes the wetlands, which extend to about 6,000 or 7,000 acres, but there's all the upland area, which essentially drains down into the wetland. It's about 20 miles from north to south, and it varies in terms of width, and I think it's about 2 miles at its widest point. And essentially, it does a number of things. It's significant because there are two flows to it. There's a south flow and there's a north flow. And the south flow of the swamp provides water into the Croton Reservoir system, which feeds into New York City. And the north flow finds its way north through the Swamp River into the Housatonic and ultimately into Long Island Sound. Now, the significance of the watershed is first of all that the south flow provides water for New York City, but most importantly it provides single source aquifer for the residents of the Harlem Valley, not the Hudson Valley. It provides the water supply for the occupants of the Harlem Valley, and it's a single source aquifer, so there's no water coming in from outside. So the watershed operates to act as a recharge basin for that. Secondly, because of its location, it provides essentially a habitat corridor, and it's a very important flyway. The Audubon recognise it as part of the Atlantic Flyway, so it provides refuge and food and overnight roosting for birds in their transitory sessions. But it's also, as I say, a very important wildlife corridor. So there's a number of aspects about the Great Swamp which make it very important that it's conserved and appropriately stewarded.
Great. So in October of 2016, both of our organizations, Oblong and Putnam County Land Trust, were awarded the National Land Trust Excellence Award, and it's the first time in New York State that anybody was given this award, and it was through the LTA, the Land Trust Alliance, in New York State. I'd like to congratulate you, and maybe you could talk a little bit about the award.
Well, I think, first of all, we should congratulate PCLT as well, because it was through our joint efforts that we were able to achieve this. Well, there's a bit of a history to this award, and the first thing perhaps I should back up and say that what's become quite apparent in recent years is that conservation of land in terms of 5 acres here and 5 acres there doesn't really work. There needs to be connectivity between these two. So the concept of landscape style or landscape scale conservation has become important. And what's required then amongst the land trust community is to develop, if you like, landscape scale collaboration. So there's only so much that the Oblong can do in its bailiwick, and there's only so much that Putnam County Land Trust can do in its bailiwick. And yet, when we come together, there's very much more than we can achieve. So the idea was that we would get together on this great project with a view to developing this landscape scale conservation plan for the Great Swamp watershed. And the Land Trust Alliance were aware of the conversations that we'd had with PCLT for some period of time, and they said, look, you guys really need to develop a collaboration. It's no good talking about it. We're willing to put up some money, and a not insignificant amount of money, to enable you to collaborate. And we embarked upon that, and we're in the process of working through the 2 initiatives that we began to establish as a consequence of that grant.
So I see right here you've got the sign that's been approved. Would you like to show it so that people can recognize it? This soon will be showing up on the streets.
Yes, the important thing about this is that this Catalyst grant, this collaboration with Putnam, gave rise to two committee initiatives, one of which was called the Signage Committee. And this is the agreed signage that we have. And the purpose of this is that it will be erected on major thoroughfares at entrance to the swamp so that people are aware of its existence. So that's the activity of the signage group, and as I say, this is their agreed sign. The second initiative is called the Education Committee's initiative, and whereby they've developed a program in conjunction with the Housatonic Valley Association and Friends of the Great Swamp and some others to develop an educational program which goes under the style of Swamp Smart. We don't have any of the information or the pamphlets available to show you, but that's an initiative which is well underway, and we can expect to see them hitting the streets in the near term.
So would you like to talk about the video that was done between our two organizations?
Yes. As part of the award ceremony, the LTA award ceremony, they decided to shoot a video to promote this. And I think we spent approximately 2 days shooting with an accomplished videographer. And that video is now available, and I think it's on both our websites.
It is, yes. Okay, so next we'd like to show the video.
The Great Swamp is one of the 3 largest wetlands in New York State.
We think it's a beautiful place. It's an important place environmentally and ecologically.
The flora and fauna are beautiful. The air is pure.
The silence, the bird life, and you would never believe you're 40 or 50 miles from Manhattan.
It's just a wonderful place to live.
Both these organizations, both Putnam and Oblong, had for an extended number of years, if you like, doing their own thing in their own part of the watershed.
It's challenging to try to protect the Great Swamp because the swamp itself runs 40 miles from north to south, is over 60,000 acres.
On the larger scale, the Great Swamp provides around 10% of the water to New York City.
It also supplies water for many of the towns and the residents who live here.
So it's really important that a comprehensive strategy is evolved to deal with upland, lowland and wetland areas.
Our challenge has been to educate people about its importance.
And the word swamp has all kinds of meanings to different people.
There was a conversation with Ethan Winter of the Land Trust Alliance, and he said, well, you guys really need to get together and do something constructive. Instead of talking about it, do something. And the idea about the collaboration was really to become a more unified group and a more effective group. Because the fact of the matter is that Mother Nature does not pay much attention to lines on maps and municipal boundaries. So we got together in fairly short order this application for a catalyst grant, and lo and behold, the ACE saw fit to grant it to us.
Funding to build capacity, to help them do strategic planning and to complete conservation projects in their area.
We were then faced with the problem of actually figuring out, now what are we going to do? Having talked about it, now we actually have to go do it.
And from that, we set up 2 subcommittees. One is for signage and one is for Swamp Smart.
An educational program designed to increase people's awareness.
There's a number of things that just the ordinary citizen can do to make a big difference.
Understanding why educating their children about this wonderful natural resource and biotic corridor is extremely important.
We are all stewards of the Great Swamp, and that has been the basis of our work going forward.
Oblong and Putnam County Land Trust are thinking about how to take their work to the next level.
It's really been a lot of fun. It's great to sit around a table with other land trust people and discover that you all have the same interests and the same love.
And I just want to transfer that love of nature to as many people as I can reach.
The more education they get will not only improve their life, but it'll improve the life of all the generations to come.
One last thing that I would like to discuss is that we will be that the Putnam County Land Trust will be celebrating our 48th year, and we are having a dinner on Saturday, March 25th at the Centennial Golf Club, and it's a wonderful. It's basically our biggest fundraiser of the year, and we invite local people who are interested in the environment as well as anybody who's interested in attending. It's a great event, and we have all kinds of raffles, and we have all kinds of auction items and so forth for fundraising. But it's also a great sociable event. So if you are interested in attending, you can visit our website, which is www.pclt.net, which is Putnam County Land Trust, but it's just pclt.net. And if you're interested in attending, the information is on that website. So Chris, you've been volunteering for Oblong for quite a long time. Can you please explain some of the work that you've been doing and that Oblong has been doing?
Absolutely. I think it falls into a number of categories. The first thing that we've done is essentially establish ourselves as the go-to environmental organization in Pawling and its immediate environs. And from that, a whole range of things has expanded. So we've obviously been involved in acquiring property, the fee interest in property, and we've obviously been involved in acquiring conservation easements, either because they've been given to us or because we've acquired them. So that's the land acquisition component of it, if you like. But there are several other aspects. One is we've taken a very active role with our planning board. Applicants come before the planning board with proposals to develop a tract for, say, residential purposes. And we've played a very active role with both developers and with the planning board in educating them about the implications of the layout of the subdivision. Is there habitat that needs to be preserved? Are there wildlife corridors that need to be created? Are there impervious surfaces that could be created in order to mitigate runoff? So there's a whole series of issues that we've drawn to the attention of the planning board, and therefore they have influenced the nature of the application that comes before them. So we played a very active role opposite planning and zoning boards and town boards in working with them to develop the master plan and how individual applications are addressed. So that's the second element of our involvement. We run an educational program called First Saturdays, and on the first Saturday of every month we have an event. And that could be, in the summer months it's generally outside, and it might involve something along the lines of a butterfly walk on one of our preserves, or some other outdoor event involving tree identification, that sort of thing. And in the winter months we have an indoor lecture, maybe it's associated with a video or some kind of a book opening or something like that. So that's part of our educational program. Mm-hmm. In the last couple of years, we've begun to develop some initiatives with the Pawling Central School District, our local public education department, and we're in the process of putting together some potential programming which will build on their environmental science program. And the hope is that if we can develop this template into something really meaningful, then it can be taken to other school districts in the area, and that can be offered to the students. The challenge is to find time within their busy schedule and within the core curriculum that's mandated by New York State to allow this kind of programming to be introduced. But the Pawling Central School District has evinced great interest in this, and we've identified some specific opportunities that they're working on. So I think that gives a broad spread of our involvement, but it's not just in terms of conservation. The other aspect of it is the educational component. And as we said before, mm-hmm. It's never going to be possible to acquire all the land that needs to be, all the open space that needs to be acquired. And it's really a question of educating as many people in the community as possible about the need to conserve and steward the natural resources.
That's great. Do you have volunteers beyond your board that you work with? Absolutely.
We pull in as many people as possible. We have trail clearing and other events, and we've got a fairly wide Facebook audience. I don't know what the technical term for it is, but we've got a very wide reach in terms of social media. And whenever we have an event, a number of people volunteer.
Mm. And how do you raise funds for Oblong?
Well, we have to twist some arms occasionally. And it's become more challenging in the last few years, but we have an annual fund drive, mm-hmm. and occasionally, and in fact we're planning an event for later this year, so in the same way that you have an annual dinner. We have not done that in quite the same way, but as I say, we have this annual fundraiser, and then there are specific events that we seek fundraising for. We also apply for grants, and the Land Trust Alliance, which is our sort of industry lobby group, for a better way to describe it, have been very generous both with Oblong and with PCLT, and they're a source of funding for acquisitions and for other educational programs that we're working on.
That's great. So is there anything else that you want to share regarding Oblong and any future projects that you've got in mind? Or
Yes, I think importantly, and we touched on this a little earlier, the idea of sort of landscape scale conservation. I think the whole land trust movement needs to elevate, and it's in the process of doing it, its objectives. And we talked again about landscape scale collaboration. And I see us at Oblong building on the relationship with PCLT going forward, not only in terms of the Great Swamp Watershed and these two initiatives that we started with signage and the Swamp Smart Educational Program. We'll build on that, but we're also involved with a number of other land trusts under the rubric of the Hudson to Housatonic Regional Conservation Plan. And there are about 30-odd land trusts in Fairfield County, Westchester, Putnam, and Dutchess, which are in the process of getting together to create this regional conservation plan. And the idea there is that we'll spread the conservation net very much wider. As I said before, there's only so much that these individual land trusts can do on their own. And the objective really, I think, is to get us all working together to collaborate, and we'll achieve much greater objectives and much greater ends by so doing.
yes, and the nickname for that is H2H, correct?
H2H RCP, which is a bit of a mouthful.
Yes. So one of the mantras that we have is team. Together, everyone achieves more, right?
Right, absolutely.
So as we're collaborating together, I do believe that we can actually really make a difference for the environment.
I think it's absolutely key. As I say, things have changed. The level of awareness in the community about things like climate change, global warming. There are obviously some elements of the community that don't necessarily accept that that's happening, but the evidence seems to be fairly conclusive. And the Earth is a scarce resource, and we need to husband its resources.
I agree. All right. So is there anything else you want to share in terms of like the H2H project or what the next steps are?
Well, that's in its very earliest stages, and we're in the process of putting together a steering committee. With 30-odd different groups, there's lots of different objectives. Some groups are in the business of conserving open space. They only take fee interests. Other groups are only in the business of taking conservation easements. Some are interested in preserving farmland. Some are interested only in wetlands. Others are interested only in forests, and some in pollination. Corridors and the preservation of the pollination sources.
Right.
So you've got all these disparate interests, and part of the job of the steering committee is going to be attempt to find some common ground between them, draw them together, and essentially create a song sheet from which hopefully we're all going to be able to sing.
That's great. Yeah.
But that's in the very early stages.
Okay. Well, I do appreciate everything you've shared with us, and it's been a wonderful interview, and you've been a great guest, so thank you very much.
Well, thank you, and congratulations to PCLT for your 48th anniversary.
Yes, thank you.